This man is a supervisor. He's been a part of management for almost 20 years. This man is also a supervisor. He got his promotion just about 2 months ago. And this man has been head of his department for about 4 years. They each work for different companies in completely different industries, but they all have one thing in common. When a man becomes a supervisor, he finds himself in charge of a group of people and is responsible for their efforts. He is told by management, by those over him, that he must maintain a productive flow of work. But no matter how much technical knowledge he might have, there's one factor which can seriously limit his chances of success. One element that can distort everything he does, weaken him as a supervisor, impair the efficiency of his department, lower the morale of his workers, and cause him more trouble than any other single problem. And he may not even be aware of the cause of his trouble. Now, let's see if we can discover what this factor is and what we can do about it. We start with our new supervisor, Steve Wilkins, as he begins an appraisal interview with one of his men.
You know about this appraisal stuff.
Sure, every 6 months.
If I put it off any longer, I'll have 2 to make out. Of course, I know the kind of work you do, but this is for personnel.
Yeah, I know. I've been through them before. You want me to look at it?
Yes. But understand, it isn't my idea. After all, how can you rate a guy you've worked with for so long?
That's okay, Steve. Don't worry.
I went through last year's form, the one Mr. Perry made out, and wrote out what looked, well, reasonable. But nobody's going to look at it anyway.
Hardly the way appraisal interviews should go. Here's a chance to go over past performance. Let the worker know where he stands, how he can improve his work. Steve's company also hopes these interviews will help supervisors understand their people better, become more sensitive to existing problems. Appraisal interviews, properly conducted, can accomplish all this. Now, Steve should know. He's been briefed thoroughly on the matter, but there's more than what we see on the surface. Let's dig deeper into the minds of both men, Steve the supervisor and Art the worker.
Then everything's all right?
No, everything's not all right. But how can I tell him he's causing friction in his section? Always some problem, isn't there? Well, let's knock off this paperwork.
If something's wrong, I'd be better off knowing what it is.
Sure. You want me to do anything?
Just look it over and sign it. Maybe I should open up and be honest with Art. He knows his work. Could be in line for a promotion, too. If he could only get along with the rest of the men. But if I tell him about the complaints, he won't like it. Or me. I'd better not say anything. These things usually work themselves out.
Something is wrong. He's rating everything okay, but he's not telling me what he really thinks. I wonder why. What's he holding back? I hate a brush-off like this. Good or bad, I'd like to know what goes on, where I stand.
Everything look all right?
I suppose so.
All right. I gotta get back to work. Guess that does it. Thanks a lot.
Sure. See you.
Revealing, isn't it? What people really think. But what about the supervisor who compromises his actions out of fear of what his men might think of him? It's actually a common weakness, one that causes many different problems. Now, here are 2 men who work for another company.
How are things going? Okay. I've been wanting to talk with you, Dave. I guess this is as good a time as any. I don't quite know how to say this, but, well, our department's on the spot.
No. Why, what's wrong?
Well, the front office is putting on the pressure.
They are. Why?
Well, we're making more mistakes than ever. We're way behind on our schedule.
I suppose I have been slacking off. Well, here's where I get it.
Well, now look, Hal. You know I'm holding up more than my end of the job.
Sometimes you do, and other times you don't. But what can I do? Whenever I had to really level with someone, I felt they resented it. Dave, I'm not trying to fix any blame. I just want to locate the trouble spots, that's all.
Well, we've had a lot of rush jobs lately, and we're overloaded.
I've heard that one before. Well, I know you turn out all you can under the circumstances, but well, when the front office sees our figures, they put on a lot of pressure.
Well, I wish I could suggest something, Hal, but nobody downstairs wants to do more than he has to.
I know, but I don't want to antagonize an entire department. I know.
Well, anything you can suggest, let me know.
Oh, yeah? There's not a suggestion I could make that you wouldn't resent. Well, we'll all have to try harder, that's all.
Sure, I could try harder if I had to. But when you can sell the boss a worn-out alibi, why try? Still, it would be nice to get some clear direction around here.
Well, you know you can count on me.
I guess we better get back.
Right.
Again, need for approval took precedence over job requirements. Result? Hal failed to cope with the problems of his department, and Dave ended up feeling his boss was an easy mark, a man he couldn't respect too highly. Now, here's a supervisor who, fortunately, is not faced with any immediate problem, who in general is satisfied with his men's work.
Jim, I've an idea to simplify things considerably. It should cut our costs as well. Oh, look at this flow chart. Since it affects your section, I wanted to talk it over with you before going ahead.
What do you know? He's really worked this out. Looks like a good idea, too.
What do you think?
Never can tell how much work these changes might mean. Better play it cagey.
I don't know. A change like this could disrupt an awful lot of relationships.
If he doesn't support this change, it'll never work.
Well, I suppose it'll move people around some. Still, they have to get used to changes, don't they? Especially for the better?
Maybe. But I think you're better off leaving things as they are. The work's getting done. Everybody's getting along.
Oh, you know I want everybody satisfied. But don't you think this would mean greater efficiency?
Never did see everybody satisfied. And this change will probably mean more work at first. So why ask for it?
Phil, I know how the men think. They won't like it.
And maybe they won't like me for suggesting it. Maybe he's right. It will take some more effort at first.
I thought it was a good idea. But if you're sure the men won't buy it, then I'll go along with you.
If you think it's so hot, why drop it so quickly?
Well, I guess it's worth thinking about. But for the moment, leave well enough alone.
Well, I suppose that settles it.
Wonder why he let me talk him out of it so easily.
Sorry, that's the way I see it.
Oh, that's okay. Don't worry.
I'm not going to worry. You're the boss.
And another supervisor fails to do his job. Why? How could these failures have been avoided? Now, let's analyze what we've seen. First, a man who couldn't tell his subordinate where he stood because he himself was insecure. Another who so needed approval that he was afraid a perfectly reasonable correction would be taken as personal criticism and bring resentment. And finally, a man so preoccupied with his men's feelings toward him that it influenced his decision to make a needed change. We saw how all these men tried to do a job and be liked, yet ended up by achieving neither. Their fear of not getting approval was so great that they acted frightened, insecure, and even immature. This fear made it impossible for them to think about their situations realistically, made them unwilling or unable to say what they really thought and felt, a fact which was easily apparent and which made it practically impossible for their men to respect them. Who can like an evasive boss? How can a worker have much regard for a supervisor who is so wrapped up in himself that he doesn't try to understand his employees' problems? Supervisors like these fear that legitimate requests will be considered too demanding. They evaluate everything in terms of their men's probable reactions. Now, how can such people be very valuable either to their men or to their companies? But what if the conversations we saw had never taken place? What might have happened if these supervisors had been different? Free of fear of loss of approval, willing to look at their men as people with needs similar to their own. Does it make any difference if we stop worrying about how popular we are with the people we supervise? Let's find out if we can be firm and forthright without damaging good relationships with our personnel. Now, would this have had any effect on Steve and the worker who couldn't get along with his group?
What's up, Steve? Time for another periodic appraisal, Art. But let's talk for a few minutes first.
This is a good chance for me to find out where I stand with Steve.
You mean another 6 months have passed?
6 months. It seems more like 2 weeks since Art and I worked together. And now I'm his boss, making out his appraisal form. I don't relish the job, but it's got to be done and done right.
That's right.
6 months ago, Mr. Perry made one of these out for me. You know, Art, before you're made responsible for the work of other people, you don't have to think of them according to these standards. And even if you thought they could improve, you wouldn't mention it.
I wonder what he's leading up to. Looks different from the other side of the desk, huh?
I'm glad he realizes that. Well, you have to size up a problem more objectively. Not let friendship influence your judgment.
You're leading up to something, Steve. What is it?
You'll probably resent my even listening to the men's complaints, but I can't ignore them. An experienced man like Art shouldn't make it so rough on the new men. Well, you know the purpose of these interviews is to give us a chance to sit down and go over the records of the past 6 months, find out where we stand today, and learn what we can do to improve ourselves.
Yes, I know.
The records here indicate that your output is the best in the department. I don't know of a job that you've tackled that you haven't gotten out ahead of schedule.
Yeah, but look at the low rating it gave me on working relations. But?
Yes, there is a but. I've been able to give you a good rating on everything except your ability to get along, to work with other people. Lately, I've been getting some complaints.
Complaints? I wasn't aware of any trouble. Oh? What kind of complaints?
I heard there was some dissension recently. And I feel it's only right to tell you so that together you and I can find out what's causing it.
This must be more serious than I thought. Well, I don't know who you've been listening to, and I don't care, but I think things would be a lot better if people would just mind their own business.
Mind their own business?
I mean all these jokers that don't know what they're doing half the time. Then complain because I'm getting out more than they are.
You mean the new men?
Yes.
You mean you don't think they're trying to do a good job?
Well, I don't know. I suppose so. I don't bother with them very much.
Uh-huh.
Oh, sure, some of them come around asking me questions about things.
And you couldn't help them?
Well, I guess I could, but it means dropping what I'm doing and then picking up again.
Well, if the older men can't help them, how else are they going to learn?
Sure, but it's sort of annoying being interrupted with questions.
Yes, that's always a problem.
So, how do you know what you're supposed to do?
Art, there's more to a job than production. Sure, that's most important. But helping out these new men is important, too. Especially from your viewpoint. More than anything, I'd say it's what's holding you back.
I see what you mean. Comes under the heading of cooperation, huh?
Cooperation is right. And it looks like that department's going to get more of it now. I think we've seen enough to learn that a supervisor who feels free to express himself creates an atmosphere in which problems can be solved. It's interesting, too, that Art seems to have more confidence in his boss. Like everyone, he feels more secure with the channels of communication open. Now, let's look at Hal and Dave again. Hal, you remember, was faced with the problem of what to do about Dave, whose work had become unsatisfactory.
Well, how are things, Dave? Okay. No problems?
No, everything's fine.
Dave sometimes turns out very good work, but he's not very consistent. It may not be pleasant, but we've got to talk it over. Get to the bottom of the trouble. I've been meaning to talk with you, Dave, but this isn't the right place. How about stopping by after your break?
Well, I can come in now, okay?
Fine.
Good.
Well, it sounds like a great game, Dave.
It certainly was.
Wish I'd been there. Pull up a chair.
Thanks.
Dave, I wanted to talk to you about your work.
I suppose I have been slacking off. Well, here's where I get it.
Now, wait a minute, Hal. You know I'm holding up more than my end of the job.
Looks like I hit a sore spot. Wonder what's bothering you.
You used to. But something's wrong, Dave. What is it?
That last job was a mess. I knew he wouldn't overlook it.
Wrong? Nothing's wrong. Why?
I don't think there's any point in beating around the bush. When you started in this section, Dave, you did a fine job. But the records show that recently you've fallen off quite a bit. Now, it's to your interest as well as mine for me to see if I can help.
Well, what do you mean? There's nothing I can't do.
I'm sure you can do all the work very well. Maybe I haven't made it clear what's expected.
And if he can admit he isn't right all the time, I guess I can, too.
No, that's not it. I suppose sometimes I slack off a bit.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get at, Dave. Why?
Well, you know how it is. Certain jobs are more interesting, some you don't like so much. You sort of ease off.
So that's it. You think it's okay to ease off because you're not interested in the job?
Well, no, but I didn't think it was all so important. But I guess you're right.
Don't worry, Hal. I'll pick up.
Okay, Dave. I just want you to understand that we have to keep the entire job in mind, not just a part of it.
Guess I can't argue with that.
How do you think Dave is going to feel about Hal now? Didn't Hal's awareness of the problem and his honesty with Dave provide the kind of direction that Dave needed? And won't Hal's firm yet appropriate action result in better work, greater satisfaction for everyone? Now, in our third case, due to his fear of being unpopular, Phil gave up a good plan to improve the work methods in his department. Would a more realistic attitude have made a difference here?
Jim, I've an idea to simplify things considerably. It should cut our costs as well. Now, look at this flow chart. Since it affects your section, I wanted to talk it over with you before going ahead.
What do you know? He's really worked this out. Looks like it might be a good idea, too.
What do you think?
Never can tell how much work these changes might mean. Better play it cagey. I don't know. A change like this will disrupt an awful lot of, relationships.
He seems sort of afraid of this change.
Yes, it'll take a while for everybody to get used to it. But if we can get over that hurdle, how do you think the idea will work?
It might work. But if it doesn't, we'll disrupt our section and get behind in our work. Well, I don't know. It might work, but it seems risky. What if it doesn't pan out?
He must be worried about something else. But what?
What do you mean, risky?
Well, it's hard to say how the men will feel about it.
Okay. So for a while, I might not be the most popular guy around here. But in the long run, it'll be to everyone's advantage. And eventually, they're bound to see it.
Why would they object to this, Jim?
Well, you know how it is. If they don't understand something, they begin to get worried. And they start listening to all sorts of rumors.
Worried? What about?
Well, how much work it means.
I see. Well, it might look that way at first. But just look here again and see if, in the long run, you don't think this is to the men's advantage. Well, once we all get used to it, I'll bet everyone agrees it's easier than our present setup.
Well, I don't mean to say that it's not a good idea. But we're going to have to be careful how we present it.
That's right.
As a matter of fact, what we should do is have this made into a poster. And then call everyone together and explain it to them.
We have now seen two different kinds of supervisors. First, men who were ineffective because of their overwhelming need for acceptance and approval. Now, those were inadequate leaders, lacking in understanding of themselves and their men, failing to communicate their own thoughts and feelings, unable to recognize and cope with the needs of the situation. On the other hand, when our supervisors were not overly concerned with their own needs, they could devote full attention to the requirements of their jobs. They were able to understand the responsibilities of leadership and express themselves without fear of any resentment they might incur, able to provide the understanding, recognition, and security their men needed. Now, would it not be a good idea, therefore, when judging others, to ask ourselves whether we are really being honest and straightforward? When we mistake actions we don't like, are we so influenced by the other person's reaction that we can't do what we know is right? In handling the problems for which we have a responsibility, are we more concerned with ourselves than with the welfare of our men and our company? When a man becomes a supervisor, he must develop as an individual, accurately understand his role, and sharpen his personal qualities to fill it. Most important, he must have insight into his own needs for approval. The more he can do this, the more he will be free to apply his technical abilities. The more he's interested in his people rather than himself, the more they will think of him, the company, and their jobs. The more self-respect he has, the more confidence his people will have in him. The more attention he can devote to his men's needs, the more opportunities he will give them to improve, and the better work they'll do. If a supervisor can accept the fact that he should not put his desire to be a good guy ahead of his responsibilities to his men and his company, he'll not only be a better supervisor, but he'll get the respect and the admiration of his people as well.